Welcome to the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition. I'm Kai Arnö, CEO of the MariaDB Foundation, and I have the pleasure to introduce you to a packed agenda. Today's topic is the MariaDB release policy from a DBA and developer perspective. We're not talking about features themselves, but about how features are released, as well as security patches and other bug fixes. We have some very interesting speakers here, and to make things lively and interactive, the speaker slots are followed up by a Q&A session by another subject matter expert. To make sure that the topics are covered from the user perspective and not the vendor perspective, we have one session about the Linux distribution perspective by Debian and two sessions about the user perspective by Microsoft and by Asia's coolest bank, DBS Bank from Singapore, one of the world's most digitally native and most profitable banks. We conclude the event by a panel to which we have invited all the presenters and the subject matter experts, as well as some extra guests. Given the time zones span everything from Australia over Singapore and Europe to both US coasts, not everyone could attend, but I'm confident you will enjoy the discussion and learn a lot from it. So, welcome to the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition. Our first presenter is Daniel Bartholomew from MariaDB Corporation. He has built almost every single MariaDB server since it started. So this means he knows all about the process. He's also an accomplished author, above all on MariaDB, so this means that he can explain things very well. He talks about the actual build process itself, and in the Q&A session he is interviewed by Vincenzo Ciorbaru, team lead at the MariaDB Foundation. He's also joined by Vlad Bogolin, the MariaDB Foundation expert on buildbot, the continuous integration tool. So go right ahead, Daniel.
Hello, and welcome to my talk today on building MariaDB. My name is Daniel Bartholomew, but my last name is kind of long, so in the MariaDB world, I go by dbart pretty much everywhere. So if you see me on IRC or in Zulip chat, that's how you'll find me. My day job is as the MariaDB release manager, which basically means that I'm the person that shepherds a release in between the time when the developers are finished coding and when it shows up on mariadb.org or mariadb.com for download. I also have a website, if you're into that sort of thing, and I've written some books about MariaDB, though the two there on the left are really out of date now. But anyway, that's not why we're here. I wanted to talk today about how we build and test MariaDB. Central to any open source software project like MariaDB is the code, but end users, more often than not, prefer something they can install directly, like binary tarballs, RPMs, Debian packages, and so on. But why should we bother with all that? We meaning MariaDB. Many open source projects, when it's time for a release, simply take the snapshot of their code and pronounce it done. But while that may be just fine for some people, it's not fine for most end users. It also turns out that compiling and testing on a wide variety of operating systems and processor architectures is very valuable from a development standpoint. More on that later. So how do we do it? Well, central to our continuous integration infrastructure is a piece of software called buildbot. Their website is located here, by the way. Anyway, the way that buildbot works starts with a central main buildbot node, and then there are many worker nodes. These worker nodes can be real or virtual. They can be on different processor architectures, and so on. The main node polls a source code repository, which in our case is a Git repository on GitHub, and it watches for commits in all the various trees and branches. When it sees one, it sends out jobs to the various worker nodes. At the same time, it keeps the developers up to date through a web interface and through other types of notifications. The basic build loop starts with buildbot having a worker create a source tarball. This source tarball is then sent to all of the various worker nodes, and they compile whatever type of build they were set up to do. For example, Debian packages. But it could just as easily be a generic Linux binary, an RPM package, or even a Windows MSI package. These packages are then tested extensively. We run install tests, upgrade tests, feature tests, and so on. And the various tests will either pass or sometimes fail. But failures are okay because the developer who made the commit will see the failure and make a new push into the source tree, and the whole make a tarball, farm out jobs to the workers, build packages, and test, that whole loop will repeat. And hopefully this time, all the tests will pass. The primary buildbot instance for MariaDB since about 2009 has been at buildbot.askmonty.org. This is what the build grid for a specific branch looks like. From here, you can click into any of the builds and take a look at the build properties, the tests that were run, and so even delve into the logs to find out exactly what was done and what happened during the build and tests. We're very close to replacing this older buildbot instance with a new one that can be found at buildbot.mariadb.org. This instance has a different UI, but offers much the same functionality as the old instance. This is what the grid view looks like, and you can click into the build, check out build properties, and look at the test results and view the raw build and test logs. So that's buildbot, but what operating systems do we actually build for? On the Linux side, we try to build on the most popular distributions, including Debian and Ubuntu, Red Hat, CentOS and Fedora, and SUSE and OpenSUSE. We also build on macOS and Windows. The specific package types we build include deb packages for Debian, Ubuntu, and all their variants, RPM packages for Red Hat, CentOS, Fedora, SUSE, and OpenSUSE, and then PKG and MSI packages for macOS and Windows, respectively. We also build on various processor architectures, including, of course, x86 and x86-64 from Intel and AMD, but also PowerPC from IBM, both big endian and little endian variants on both Power 8 and Power 9 processors, and we also build on ARM servers. We've found that everything else being equal, operating system, storage, RAM, etc., compiling and running tests on a variety of processor architectures can uncover hidden bugs. So we find doing this extremely useful. So how do we decide when to release? Well, for starters, we have a roadmap on our bug tracker at jira.mariadb.org. We do quarterly releases that include every bug fix we've made since the previous release, and as of right now, our next round of MariaDB Server releases is scheduled for the end of January 2021. But we're not inflexible with this release schedule. We also have a security policy that basically states if we find something really bad, we'll do an immediate release, generally within a day or two. However, we don't support every version of MariaDB forever. We also have a maintenance policy for the various major versions of MariaDB, which states in general that from the time a major release series has its first stable or GA release, we will keep providing maintenance and security updates for at least 5 years for those operating systems that are not deprecated. I mention this because we also have a deprecation policy. that governs when we will stop building MariaDB on a particular operating system. For example, on the previous slide, it said that the 5-year cutoff date for MariaDB 10.2 is in May of 2022. However, Ubuntu 16.04 LTS Xenial will be deprecated in April of 2021. So even though we will still be providing updates to MariaDB 10.2 after April 2021, we won't be providing packages for Ubuntu Xenial. Of course, after April 2021, even Canonical, Ubuntu's parent company, won't be providing updates for Xenial. So by that time, you really should have already upgraded your Ubuntu machines past that point anyway. So that's all that I have for you today. Thank you very much, and I guess it's time for some questions.
So I have here with me today Daniel Bartholomew and Vlad Bogolin. So Daniel is our release manager, and Vlad is the main developer of our new buildbot project. And I have a couple of questions for Daniel, and maybe Vlad can also help us out with some of the information.
Cool.
So I'm going to ask questions from a developer's standpoint, application developer standpoint, or a DBA. So the first question that comes to mind is, how can I get the latest MariaDB releases?
Okay, so the latest MariaDB releases, there are 2 official locations. There's from MariaDB.com. It's MariaDB.com/downloads. But those are primarily focused on the x86-64 builds of MariaDB. So those are, and also those are the ones that if you have a support contract with MariaDB, those are the ones they're going to want you to use. So MariaDB.com/downloads is where you can find those. But then the MariaDB Foundation also has a download site at downloads.mariadb.org, and there you can find x86-64 builds, but also ARM builds and PowerPC builds.
All right, that's good to know. Now, this is another question again related about packages. So if I get MariaDB packages from my own distribution, say I'm running Ubuntu and I just install MariaDB Server. Are those packages the same as the ones that we get from the MariaDB buildbot, or are they different?
No, they're different. Each distribution will have their own packaging person or team and their own build infrastructure. For example, Otto Keklanian, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Otto, he builds MariaDB for Debian and Ubuntu, and builds it on their infrastructure, on the Debian build farm. And then other distributions will be similar. They'll have a person or a packaging team, and they'll take the source code. They'll either take our official source tarball, or they'll grab it directly from our Git repository on GitHub, and they will take the source and build it themselves and package it in their packaging system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and I know Vlad did quite a bit of work with Docker images. Maybe you have a question about Docker for Daniel?
Are there any Docker officially supported Docker images, including MariaDB?
I know we have images on Docker Hub, but I'm not really involved in that effort, so I don't know much about that setup. I know they're there. There are some people at the foundation that are working on it, and your best bet is probably to ask at the MariaDB Zulip chat to ask about those. I know I just know they exist, basically.
Right. So we are. I think we're working on improving support for Docker images now. Now the other interesting question is, we have lots of packages for MariaDB. Now, how do they get distributed to end users?
Okay, so what we do is we upload them to a network of mirrors. These mirrors are scattered all around the world. They're hosted by companies, by universities, in some cases by individuals. If you go to downloads.mariadb.org, you can see the list of the mirrors, and the download system will try to guess a mirror that's close to you, but then they will also list the mirrors, and you can try to pick one that you know is closer if it guesses right. It usually guesses on a country level. And so it sometimes guesses, like if you're in Germany, it may guess Hamburg when you're closer to Berlin, so you can choose a closer mirror. But yeah, there's a couple hundred, I think. So there's a lot. And then the repositories are also mirrored. And so when you configure a repository, it will it'll set you up with a specific mirror. And again, you can select a mirror that's closer to you.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's useful information. I know there's lots of mirrors, and so sometimes I know they can go offline, but I think most of them are reliable. So
yeah. The thing you have to keep in mind is that the MariaDB Foundation organizes the mirrors, but they don't control the mirrors. The mirrors are controlled by whichever entity is sponsoring the mirror, and sometimes they don't inform us. They don't inform anyone that they've stopped mirroring. They just stop. And so we rely on user reports to learn about it. We also have some monitoring in place, but we sometimes don't catch things. So you have to be aware that they're under the control of whichever entity is sponsoring it, whether it's a university or a company.
All right. That makes sense. So Vlad, did you have a question for Daniel?
Yes, I was wondering if Daniel said that the packages are so widespread distributed, how can the user make sure that the ones that he gets are genuine from MariaDB and do not pose any security issues?
So if you go to downloads.mariadb.org to download, we have checksums and GPG signatures that you can view there for things like our binary tarballs, our Windows packages, and things like that. And then also all our repositories are also signed. So if you're using apt in Debian or Ubuntu, or if you're using yum or DNF in like Red Hat or Fedora, those repository the packaging tools, repository tools, they will check those checksums and the signature files when they download and install. Like when you do a yum install MariaDB, it will check the signature for you, and you can also verify it yourself. We have a page on the knowledge base. Let's see if I can remember. It's mariadb.com/kb/en/gpg. That GPG page lists the signatures that we use, the signature fingerprints, but then also on the downloads page, that's where you can find the checksums and the signatures for every file in the releases.
And who's this mysterious person signing all these packages?
Well, I sign all the packages. So if you see a signature, I signed it with my name. Well, not with my name.
So speaking of sign packages, you mentioned that buildbot builds every push that gets made. Mm-hmm. Which means that there's probably packages for every push that's made. Can I make use of these packages, let's say at my own risk?
You can. Our buildbot has stores the files. I'm not exactly sure where you can access them. I know they're there. The main thing that we're interested in is the logs that we have. And so those are the things that are more publicly visible.
Yeah, here I can add some more information regarding the new buildbot. So
okay, that's good.
for the new buildbot, the same as Daniel said, the packages are stored and they can be downloaded from ci.mariadb.org. We are currently storing a small time frame of packages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we obviously can't store them forever. Usually it's, a week or 2 weeks or something like that. I don't know what you have it set for currently.
It's something similar.
Yeah.
So now a question for both of you. How can I, as a community member, contribute to buildbot in any way?
I'm probably going to defer this more to Vlad for this. The main there, people have donated hardware for the buildbot effort. They've made code contributions. They've done things like that. A lot of our buildbot efforts are coordinated on Zulip chat in the buildbot stream. So if you want to help out, then that's where you can go to ask and talk about it.
Yeah, I agree that that's a good starting point, and every contribution is more than welcomed. Regarding the new buildbot, donating hardware, it's quite easy since it mainly uses remote Docker access, so minimal configuration on the worker machines are needed.
All right, so I assume that we will get, or we already have, a tutorial on how to set up a buildbot slave for anyone that wants to donate.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty easy process.
Yeah.
All right, so anyone watching would be very grateful for any donations you might have for us. And you're going to be using the same packages that those workers are building.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I had for Daniel and Vlad. Thank you very much. Thank you for answering all these questions, and let's head over to Kai for the next speaker.
Thanks, Vincenzo, Daniel, and Vlad. Our next presenter is Sanja, Alexander Bielkin. He talks about the step between development and building, namely merging. Into which release are the bug fixes introduced, or rather which releases in plural? What is a blocker list and what kind of testing goes on? Sanja's Q&A session is also handled by nobody else than Vincenzo Ciorbar.
Hello, my name is Alexander Bielkin, also known as Sanja. I am working for MariaDB Corporation, and today I want to tell you how we in MariaDB trying to achieve highest possible quality for our releases. So work started a bit earlier than real merges, building and other stuff. We are checking our blocker list. So what is blocker list? If we suspect that some bug or some task is so important that it definitely should go in the next release, it's marked as a blocker. So just before releasing, we are just looking through this list, remind people to look at the tasks and decide if it's really important, probably with some investigations, or just fix everything. Then also we are looking on our buildbot. Buildbot, it's a server which actually it's several servers which build each commit and test it. So just before release, we are checking that our main trees has no problems. So here you can see on the picture the last column, which represents the last commit, is green, so it's release ready. And if something just was pushed and broke everything last minute, we can take the previous commit and continue with it. So also what we have to be sure that mistake made only once. It's three main things: our regression tests, our merge procedure, and a checklist in this merge procedure. So let's check what's in details. Regression test. Each bug should be accompanied with a test which was failing before the bug was fixed and pass after. It's requirement for the review process. So all fixes goes with the test, and then all this and other tests are run by buildbot in a variety of architectures and also the different tests. So it's just normal tests, the default. Also the test run with prepared statement protocols, test run against embedded server with Valgrind and Asan. Also there are special tests for different plugins and storage engines. Also during this process buildbot build packages actually the same way we are doing for release. Actually release packages are taken from buildbot and then released. And also buildbot trying to upgrade from previous minor or major versions just to be sure that it could be done, and some other tests. So this is regression test suite. Also how we are sure that if something fixed, for example, in 10.2, it will be also fixed 10.3, 10.4, and so on and so forth. So each developer push changes in the lowest version we decide to fix it. And then in the merge, we just move all changes from version to version upwards. And so having the test passed and everything green on buildbot, we are sure that if something was tested for 10.2, it's impossible just skip it somehow and for 10.3 or some other versions. Everything is fixed there. Also, we are merging not only our stuff, which could be relatively easy, but some third-party things. And just to avoid skip something, we have some checklist. Also, you see that it's a lot of things, and we are using the same checklist to cooperate between people which take part in the merge. Also, there are some things which are specific for some versions and shouldn't be forgotten. For example, connector C or Oracle mode parser, and it's reflected in this list. So when everything marked done, everything is green, everything is built, it's go to Daniel who prepare it's for release and making release note, another very important stuff. So, but I think Daniel will talk about it in more details. But sometimes also happens that we need to make urgent release. Why it happens? If some serious security problem found, for example, in our or on third-party code, and we have to protect our users, and so release as soon as possible, and users couldn't wait till the next quarter for our regular release. For example, it happened last time in October, and it was something with Galera, if I'm not mistaken. So this one. The other area problem is that our release affects many users. For example, in this November, we make urgent release because our change, which start more strictly check incoming packets, broke some third-party connectors and libraries which do not obey protocol. So we have to relax the rules to allow third-party connectors. And after that, we are now incorporating these third-party libraries in our buildbot check. Also, to be sure that we are really only fixing something urgent and do not add more bugs, we usually doing such urgent release on top of previous release with adding only necessary fixes to it, nothing else. So that is all what I wanted to tell about our release process. Thank you.
And thank you, Sanya, for the great presentation as part of our MariaDB Server Minifest. I really liked how you described the release process from a developer's perspective. And it's also great that it's clear and it's well structured. I like the checklist that you have so you don't miss anything. That makes it, it gives me confidence that the release process is good and that we don't get unexpected problems. Now I have a couple of questions for you. So I'm putting on my user hat. And as a user of MariaDB, what I care most is stability. But I don't always just want stability. Sometimes I need new features from MariaDB. So when I look at MariaDB versions, and I'm talking about the major versions like 10.2, 10.3, there are most of them are in a stable or general availability release. But we have a development version. I think now this is 10.6.
Yes.
So all of these have different maturity levels. Can you talk a bit more about maturity levels and what I can expect as a developer?
Okay, so the lowest maturity level is alpha, when actually everything could be changed. Also, some feature could go on, despite the fact that we mostly do not remove some old features due to compatibility. But still, something could happen. Something could happen in this direction. Also, features will be added. So it's quite unstable thing. It's probably if you want to really try some certain feature, you can just try it, but do not rely on something that it will be till the end. Then it will go to beta. When it's beta, it's definitely what is there will not go somewhere. So you can just realize that everything is included, will be included in the release. So here probably you could start developing your application for compatibility, another maybe for using new features, probably mostly. And then when we decided that it's okay, we go to Gamma or release candidate, where actually mostly bugs will be fixed and everything stabilized. So here is definitely you can use it for development, like for development something which should be compatible with new version, or maybe something which require new features. But it's better to still do not use it in production because it's not so stable.
Okay.
And then as soon as it stabilizes, we see that inflow of bugs more or less count. So then we announce it like release. And when it's released, we are quite sure. Okay, so it's release candidate. We mostly sure that it's okay for production, but better don't do it. It's still better test if it's work and report bugs if you found something. But then it will be generally available for production.
Okay, so
probably pure statistical reasons, it's not so that stable as like previous versions, but it's good enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically I can start off with a beta version, but it's better that I start off with the gamma version.
Yeah.
At least it's better if I start developing during gamma, although beta is also still possible. So that's
yes, developer. Okay, so you can start it. Yes, also it will really welcome to report some bugs if you found something, or so it also will help us. Or if you find something which is not inappropriate for developer point of view, or okay, so it's still in gamma. It's still changes are still possible.
Mm-hmm.
In beta, it's not so, but still we could add something. And beta is good. Okay, definitely good point where you can start check it with your application.
So you mentioned reporting bugs. Now I'm pretty certain I know how to report a bug, but I think the key question is, what is the best information that I need to provide to get a bug fixed? Because you mentioned that when you have a bug in an old version, it ends up getting fixed in the future versions too. So what can I do to help you out with this?
Okay, so best possible thing is to just make something which we could reproduce. So some provide us with some sequence of commands or some database or whatever, where we can just really see that bug has happened. It's best possible variant. It's make bug fixing really relatively easy. Okay, it's at least it's absent the first sometimes most difficult part, just to guess how to reproduce the bug or where the bug is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Now I want to tell you a small story about how we did an upgrade recently on the new version of buildbot. So we were previously running MariaDB 10.1, and recently we moved straight to 10.5. And I really liked that it actually worked. We just had to do MySQL upgrade. Mm-hmm. Well, it is now called MariaDB upgrade, but then it was MySQL upgrade, and everything just worked. So that gives me quite some confidence that the upgrade tests that you mentioned in your presentation are working, but I'm not quite sure exactly what you are testing during upgrade tests. So can you go into more details there?
There are several upgrade tests. There are upgrade tests which test if we could upgrade database from previous variant of database to current one. Like it's mostly this system tables, like list of users and other stuff. Mm-hmm. So if I remember correctly, we still have in our regression test suite test for upgrading from 5.5 to 10.6.
Okay.
So it's one part, but probably it's not so interesting. There are other parts. When we build packages, and trying to upgrade packages to the current version from minor or major version. And it's not only trying to upgrade. First, we install previous version, then trying to make more or less variety of tables of different engines in it. Also check what libraries it uses and other stuff. Oh, maybe no, this library is different. Okay, so then we upgrade and check that all the tables are present, so nothing gone. Also, we check what libraries all of the packages depend on and compare it with like pre-stored lists. So if we do not plan, we shouldn't accidentally got some dependence from, I don't know, some library. Or also we have plugin list, and we check that all plugins are still there, because it was once we just lost one of the plugin. So as I told in my presentation, if we made some mistake, we usually make some tests. So do not repeat this mistake twice. So like this, so we check that, check system tables and check packages for upgrading.
And is this upgrade test done for multiple distributions or just a couple of flavors?
Okay, so as far as I remember, it's all or most supported distributions. So it's Debians, RPMs, and it's CentOS, what else? Debian and Ubuntu. So like this, our variety of beasts we have.
Yeah, it's a long list. Yeah. So I'm glad.
Not as long as we wanted, probably, because some platforms are not really good supported, like for example macOS. But it's Apple made a lot to prevent some free testing on without having some real Apple hardware.
Right,
and
I understand.
There is no server Apple hardware. So
I understand. Now, final thing I had in mind is you obviously have a lot of work when it comes to preparing a release. As a user, what can I do to contribute to make sure that a new MariaDB release is as good as it can be? Anything I can provide except for just bug reports?
Yeah, of course, bug reports. And the other thing is that we have this, what's called callback plugin, where we collect some anonymous statistic about usage of our database, which also help us to know in which direction we should move, where we have pay more attention and something like this.
So with this, I can give you some sort of information as to what exactly I'm using
yes.
from MariaDB.
Yes. So
all right, that is something to
two direction, like bug reports and testing, and giving more information about real usage of database.
All right, I'll make note of that. I'll make sure to have it enabled. All right, so these were all the questions I had for you, Sanya. Thanks so much for this. And okay. I think now we need to head over to Kai.
Thanks again, Vincenzo. The next slot is on security. It's the last one from a vendor perspective, and it's presented by Sergey Golubchik, who is VP MariaDB Server at MariaDB Corporation and a board member at the MariaDB Foundation. In this context, Sergey's most important characteristic is that he is a security expert and has been so since last century. He has witnessed that IT security has become an entire industry, or rather he has himself contributed to it becoming an industry. He will tell you about the very black and white rules for what a critical security bug is and what practices guide how MariaDB Server is released from a security perspective. He has a very interesting Q&A session led by Ian Gilfillan of MariaDB Foundation. With Ian drinking tea during the interview, it looks almost like a fireside chat, and I can assure you it's well worth listening to.
Hello, welcome, and let me explain how the security process in MariaDB works. So first about me, I was MySQL code developer since 1998. Yeah, my name is at the bottom of the slide. And I was on MySQL security team all this time for 10 years. Well, most of the time actually was the MySQL security team. If you would have written something to security at mysql.com during those years, I would be the one to reply. And if you reported a security bug, I would be the one to fix it. And I was creating most of those security processes that MySQL had back then. Since 2010, I'm work in MariaDB, and again, I'm on MariaDB security team and help to create those security policies that we'll be talking about later on this talk. I'm also a VP Server Engineer in MariaDB Corporation and a board member of MariaDB Foundation. So, how do we get information about security issues? Where do we get them from? First, they could be, of course, discovered internally. We have a team of testers who routinely find and report new bugs, and some of them could be actually security related. It doesn't happen very often. Most often we get security issues through the security@mariadb.org email address. So if anything comes there, it's usually a report about security vulnerability, not necessarily valid. We have a project at HackerOne, and this is what it looks like. And that's where hackers on this site can report security issues and get their reputation increased. And also we watch Oracle critical patch updates. This is where Oracle reports about security vulnerabilities and assigns CD numbers in Oracle products, such as MySQL. This is what Oracle typical CPU looks like. CD numbers, products, some rough risk matrix, and what versions weight was appeared and fixed. So mostly we get our CVEs from Oracle critical patch updates. Those are issues that affect both MySQL and MariaDB. Although as time goes on in the last years, the code base of MariaDB and MySQL diverges, and we get less and less CVs during this path. As for MariaDB specific CVs that we get through security at MariaDB.org and HackerOne, we get 1 to rarely 3 MariaDB specific CVs per year. So what do we do with them? Well, we fix them obviously, and we follow the responsible disclosure policies. That is, if not only MariaDB is affected, but the bug issue is reported to us, then we coordinate with all affected vendors. If MySQL is affected, we talk with Oracle. If Percona server is affected, we talk with Percona. If Galera for MySQL is affected, we talk with Codership. And Codership and Percona also report issues to us if MariaDB is affected. Oracle doesn't, but that's why we watch CPUs. Then we don't, of course, disclose the issue immediately, and we always ask the security researcher who reported to us not to. There's always a disclosure embargo, which is agreed on by all affected vendors, and until all the affected products has released new fixed versions, there's embargo and the details will be not known. But after everybody has released, after this agreed on embargo, then we usually try to do a full disclosure. We also talk with Linux distributions, particularly with Debian and Red Hat security teams, but with others as well. And full disclosure is particularly what is very much appreciated by Linux distributions, because they have very capable and knowledgeable security experts and their security teams They want to know what the problem was. They want to know what if distribution needs to do anything. They might want to know if they need to port the patch somewhere else or something else is affected. They very much appreciate that we do full disclosure. So what is our actually MariaDB security policy? It's we have a very small and simple security policy, but at the same time it's quite clear and unambiguous, and I would say objective. That is, we cannot say, okay, we think it's critical, but very few people are affected, so let's say it's not very critical. There's no such subjectivity in our criteria. If the issue is critical, if it matches those rules, then it is critical, and then we do as the policy says. So it's on the slide, but let me still read it aloud. So we classify all security issues in two groups. There could be a critical security vulnerability. A critical is an exploitable vulnerability that causes arbitrary code execution or allows an authenticated user to crash the server or get access to the data. And it's very concise, so every word here is important. For example, that vulnerability has to be exploitable. If it's only a theoretical possibility, but there's no way to exploit it, then it's not critical. If there's a crash or get access to the data, then the user has to be unauthenticated. If you need to log in into MariaDB specifying username and password, then it no longer classifies as critical. All critical issues, we fix them at once, and we release new fixed version of MariaDB ASAP, usually within a few days. And yes, I can say that this policy is in place for the last 10 years, and there was never, not a single case when we didn't execute this policy. Every time when we had critical vulnerability according to those criteria, we always released fixed binaries immediately. So this is something you can very much rely on. There might be some other rules that we didn't follow as exactly, but this one we absolutely follow all the time and never break, and never did break. All security vulnerabilities that don't classify critical, they are considered medium, and they are also fixed usually at once, and fixes will be in the next planned release. That is, we do not change our release schedule because of medium security fixes, but we do promise that all security vulnerabilities will be fixed in the next release. It doesn't matter if it's critical or medium, any security vulnerability will always be fixed in the next release. Whether it's critical or medium only affects how soon the next release will be. And so how soon the next release will be, that's how our whole release schedule is based on security, is specifically tailored to provide as fast as possible release of security fixes whenever we know about them. And because Oracle releases this Oracle Critical Patch updates 4 times a year, and we don't know about those issues until Oracle releases, we create our release scheduler so that our releases immediately follow Oracle CPUs. Basically, directly after Oracle releases CPUs and Oracle releases the next version of MySQL, within a few days or a week, we release MariaDB releases with all those issues fixed in MariaDB that were fixed in the corresponding MySQL version. So this is created specifically to minimize the time when the security vulnerabilities are already known to the world, but not fixed in MariaDB yet. So following the Oracle CPU scheduler, MariaDB releases are usually happen in the last week of January, April, July, and October. So if it's a medium security vulnerability, then you can expect, when you can be sure that it will be fixed in the next release, which will be in the last week of January, April, July, or October, whichever comes first. So to wrap up, those are links where you can learn more about how we do or information about security in MariaDB. So this is the link to our security policy. This is exactly what I just said with critical and medium and when we fix that. This is our project on HackerOne, which also says the same thing about critical and medium, but also has a lot more details about what part of MariaDB, what vulnerabilities are in scope, what are out of scope, what rules we follow when we release, how we do responsible disclosure, how we communicate with vendors. All this is explained here in our HackerOne project page. As you've seen, the Oracle CPUs, they can contain those CVE numbers that identify vulnerabilities. So users often want to know, in particular Linux distributions, in what MariaDB a particular CVE was fixed. So we maintain a page in the knowledge base which for every CVE lists when it was fixed in what MariaDB version and what connector version. And some of those CVEs that Oracle lists, they simply do not apply to MariaDB because, for example, codebreak has diverged. We maintain a separate page of all CVEs that were fixed in MySQL but never existed in MariaDB. That's a separate page, and pretty much every CVE that was listed in corresponding MySQL pages on Oracle CPUs, it's present in one of those two pages. We've actually got a few praises from various security teams in Linux distributions about how good it is, how well we maintain all those pages, so they don't need to do their own research. They can very quickly look up a CVE number and find out whether it was fixed or it was not applicable. So that's basically what we do with security vulnerabilities. That's how we handle them. Now let's talk about it.
Hello to Sergey Golubchik. Thank you for an interesting presentation overview on security. So you mentioned that you started with MySQL back in 1998, and then you've been with MariaDB since 2010. How did you get into security? What were you doing before that?
It was topic always interesting to me years before 1998. So I was interested in security, in protecting other programs, breaking other programs, stuff like that. So it was rather natural. I paid close attention to how MySQL is doing in the area of security. So I was just starting replying to those mails and fixing security bugs in MySQL, and people were reporting them.
So 22 years is a long time. Have you seen what sort of changes have you seen in the industry over that time?
In the industry of security?
Yes.
It became an industry with lots of people working there, all highly specialized in their particular part of that instead. So, and I stopped being up to date with what's going on there many years ago. You just cannot actively follow if you don't work there all the time, and I don't. I'm working on databases.
So you mentioned that there were about 1 to 3 MariaDB specific CVEs each year, and that's quite a small minority of them. How many CVEs are we talking about overall?
Well, I don't know. I can't say for sure. I would need to look into the security page that I mentioned, but I think it would be maybe about 20, 30 maybe. All the rest coming from Oracle CVEs.
And how many of those are critical versus medium?
None. Well, none of them they cannot be critical coming from Oracle CVEs because, well, we don't do emergency releases for them because our releases are scheduled to be released immediately after Oracle CVEs, so it doesn't make any difference whether it's critical or not. They'll still be in the same release. Oracle releases our MySQL version, they release this CPU, and then we immediately do. So if we learn about security bug between Oracle CPU and our release, it doesn't matter whether the issue is critical or medium, it will still be in the release in the next few days. In that sense.
And if it is critical, do you think that MariaDB does enough to highlight to users that there's a critical issue that they should urgently update?
Well, generally, if we do an emergency out of unplanned release, we do a blog post just to explain users why we did the release so that they wouldn't, freak out. They would understand why this an unplanned release. It doesn't apply to security release only. We did a non-security related unplanned release mid-November. We also did a blog post to explain what it was about. So if we do an unplanned security release, we also either we explain or sometimes somebody else blogs. Like last time, I think Percorna blogged about the 2 CVs, and we did an emergency release having those fixed.
Okay. And then you mentioned that we work reporting issues to Oracle or to Codeship or to Percorna as needs be, and that Percorna and Codeship do the same back to us. How complex does it make your life, the fact that Oracle don't report those CVEs to us, that you have to look them up yourself?
That is not, the thing that Oracle doesn't report to us isn't a big deal, because we've already scheduled our whole release process around Oracle CPUs. So we basically release anyway after Oracle CPU. So that's not a problem. What is the problem is that Oracle, I have no idea to know what security issues were fixed in every MySQL release. What were they about? So I read those CPU tables that I've shown on the presentation, let's say like high, medium version. And then I look at the changes in MySQL code, and I try to map those changes if they make any sense as this vulnerability with this particular values in the table. Sometimes there's a vulnerability, there's a CV that does not map to any changes. Sometimes there's a CV that maps to many different unrelated changes. So it's always a guesswork to try to understand what particular vulnerability was about. Sometimes I see the change, but I cannot understand what bug caused it, because there's no test cases, there's nothing. So they don't disclose any information about it. And I know for a fact that security teams in Linux distributions, well, not all of them, but some of them, they do the same guesswork. They also try to map MySQL code changes to CVEs to understand what the vulnerability is about. Sometimes we discuss and share the information and trying to make our guesses more precise by doing this guesswork together. So this is the problem. But the fact that they don't report it to us immediately, that's not a big deal.
Okay. Then in the definition of critical versus medium, one of the criteria was exploitable versus maybe it's just a theoretical possibility. Is there any scope for subjectivity in that? Maybe are you sure always whether something is exploitable or not?
Yes, absolutely. But generally in this case, I'm trying to be on the safe side. And if I don't know how to exploit it, but it looks like kind of sort of exploitable, possibly for somebody who knows better about this, then just let's treat it as exploitable. So,
if in doubt, that's exploitable.
Yes, yes, I think we've seen something which was purely theoretical, but most of the time they look like exploitable, even if there is no actual exploit.
Okay.
It looks like most of the time it looks like somebody with a better knowledge of the area could have written an exploit for.
Right. So I've seen situations where it seems that companies are following either their company checklist or some sort of third-party checklist, security checklist, so criteria that must be met in order for software to be seen as safe to be deployed. And sometimes I've seen you responding in a way that's, well, is this issue really practical versus is it just something to tick off on a checkbox? Do you come across that kind of thing quite often, where there's a sort of theoretical checklist versus a real practical issue, and how does MariaDB handle that?
Well, generally we are not particularly prioritize fixing issues as compared to something which is just a checklist issue only. But sometimes we do fix those checklist issues too, because if the customer has no other way, they either won't use MariaDB or MariaDB must have this checklist feature, then we sometimes implement them too. But given the choice, we prioritize the actual security improvements over something that only creates a false sense of security.
Right. So the MySQL native plugin that was introduced back in MySQL 4.1, and that's based on a hashing algorithm based on SHA-1. So MySQL introduced SHA-256, and MariaDB introduced ED 25519, which I think is the same algorithm that's used by OpenSSH. What was the reason for the different choices there?
Well, first, the OpenSSH uses lots of different algorithms. It also uses SHA2 and ISA. So we all, both we and MySQL, we use the same algorithm that OpenSSH is using. So the story is, it's actually explained in my blog post about at MariaDB called, I think, Who Are You? The history of MySQL authentication algorithms or something like that. Hope there will be a link under the video somewhere down there. And so the story is this SHA-1 that we've used, it's double SHA-1. It was started to be perceived as unsafe, and MySQL went and implement an RSA-based approach where the password is encrypted using this asymmetric encryption RSA algorithm and sent to the client. And locally it's hashed using SHA-2. And we use this elliptic curve signature algorithm ED 25519. So the problem was with MySQL 1, so I didn't like that the client sends the password to the server completely in the original form. That is, the server will exactly know what your password is, and so malicious server will, well, basically know your password. That was the problem with historical MySQL authentication algorithms, including the one with SHA-1, and it's still the problem with the newest one in MySQL. And I didn't like that. So we've invented and implemented a different authentication algorithm where the server does not get my client's password at any point in time ever during authentication.
So given that, given the problems with the original MySQL native password authentication, why is it still the default authentication when you use password login?
Because there's no problem with it yet. So the problems are, well, there are two problems with it. One is that people just don't like SHA-1, and second is this checkbox one that you mentioned earlier. Some organizations might have a security checklist with the box "Don't use SHA-1." That's the only two reasons why somebody might not want to use MySQL native authentication, because currently it's still as secure as it was before. The known attacks about SHA-1, about finding collisions, they do not apply to this authentication. They do not make authentication less secure. They allow you to find two different passwords that will hash to the same, well, password hash, but so far they do not allow you to find the password that will map to a given hash. If you in advance can find two different passwords that will have the same hash, it doesn't really help you to break the authentication and find the password for any given hash.
Okay.
So it's quite likely that eventually, maybe very soon, SHA1 will be completely reversed, but it didn't happen yet, so far it's still safe.
So MariaDB 10.4 introduced Unix socket authentication, at least for Unix systems. What are the advantages of doing that versus the password authentication?
So the advantage is, so the best authentication is the one when you don't need to, the best way not to forget the password, not to choose a weak password, not to lose it somewhere, it's just not to use any password at all. And Unix socket authentication, it does exactly that. There's no password. And where MariaDB, it simply trusts your operating system to do the authentication for you. You need to type your password to log into your Unix box or SSH into it, or I don't know, whatever other authentication your system uses. But after you successfully manage to log in into a system, then MariaDB server simply trusts your operating system to tell who you are. Because you have already authenticated once, you don't need to do it twice using different password or the same password. And we use it now by default for the root user because the root user already has all the privileges there is. It can see all the data, all the database files, it can modify them, it can see MariaDB process in memory with everything in it. It's not really, doesn't add any additional security to require the user to enter any additional password to log in into the server, because the root user already has full control over it.
Are there any situations where it's a disadvantage to use, where the person would be recommended to disable it?
To disable it?
Yes, well, not to use it, to remove
yes,
password.
Of course. So because Unix socket plugin, it makes MariaDB to trust the operating system to tell MariaDB who you are, basically what your local username is. So if you have many users all acting from the same local username, same local Unix account, but they should be working under different database accounts, then Unix socket won't help you. I think we have a knowledge base page, maybe there should be a link down there as well, which was recently extended to explain all those cases when Unix socket is good and when it should be preferable and when it does not work very well. Configurations it doesn't work. It should all be in the knowledge base now.
Well, I think that's all we have time for. So thanks, Sergey, for joining us here in the Minifest and for your presentation and for your Q&As. And until next time.
Thank you for having me.
Now we move to the slots from a user perspective. User in this first case means a Linux distribution, specifically Debian, the most impactful Linux distribution of them all, perhaps. The Debian perspective is presented by Otto Kekalainen, who is a core contributor to Debian and maintains MariaDB for the Debian distribution. Otto is describing the very strict requirements that this Linux distro has on packaging and what this means for fixing bugs upstream, meaning for MariaDB server. And sometimes he uses the term upstream, meaning Galera or other components of MariaDB server. Otto illustrates what Debian defines as bugs in MariaDB, everything from spelling errors to a deinstall of MariaDB leaving stray files onto the hard disk. Otto's questions and answer session is being led by Daniel Black from MariaDB Foundation, and this will shed light on some of the more difficult aspects of how MariaDB is integrated into Debian. So Otto, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Otto, and I'm the person who is mainly responsible for the Debian packaging of MariaDB. And I'm now going to do you a quick overview of what happens after a new upstream release becomes available and what kind of quality assurance it goes through before it lands in the official archives of Debian and Ubuntu and becomes available for users in those distributions. Now, first of all, why is Debian and Ubuntu interesting? Well, they are among the most popular Linux distributions, and there are millions of people who start using MariaDB by running apt install MariaDB Server in these distributions. It's said that Debian is kind of the mother of all Linux distributions, or most of them. It's very old. It started back in the 90s, and the relation between Debian and Ubuntu is that Ubuntu is downstream from Debian, and most of the software in Ubuntu is directly inherited from Debian. And that is the case for MariaDB as well. We do packaging of MariaDB for Debian, and from there it flows to the Ubuntu repositories. So all of the quality assurance done in Debian will benefit Ubuntu users. So what's the current state of MariaDB and Galera in Debian? You can at any time go to packages.debian.org or Ubuntu equivalent page packages.ubuntu.com. And here you can see an overview, what is the status at the moment. And now a quick overview of what actually happens in the packaging process. So first of all, in Debian we don't use directly the upstream Git repository. Instead, there is a separate Debian packaging Git repository at salsa.debian.org, and into that repository we import every upstream release, and every upstream release is basically just one big Git commit into that packaging repository. And the tool used for this is called uscan. It will automatically scan the servers where MariaDB is published, and when there is a new release it will notify the maintainer in Debian, and using uscan you can download the upstream release, and it will verify the signatures and make sure it's authentic and so on. And it's important to understand that the upstream release is basically a tar.gzip package. We don't import the Git commits, and whatever is in that package is the contents of the official release. In Debian we don't do changes to the upstream files. Instead there is a subdirectory called Debian, and all the packaging work goes into that directory, and all the modifications happens in that subdirectory. It's also important to realize that the distribution have their own revisions of the upstream releases. So if we have 10.5.8, which is the latest upstream release, in Debian the first revision will be 10.5.8-1, and then eventually -2, and currently -3. And these Debian revisions represent new uploads of that package to Debian, which has the same upstream contents still, but there are changes to the packaging or some bugs fixed or something that's specific for Debian. And anybody can participate in the packaging work and do pull requests and stuff, but to be able to upload software to Debian you need to be a Debian developer, and there's about 1,000 people in the world who have access to be able to upload to the Debian archives, and I'm one of those, so it enables me to do this MariaDB packaging. I also package other stuff for Debian as well. The basic quality assurance system in Debian is that there is a special archive called unstable, and all new software and all new releases of new software lands in unstable first. And then there is a lot of quality assurance going on in the unstable archive, and the people who are testing software in unstable can file bugs against them. And there is a delay that a package needs to stay in unstable for a while, and only if it passes all the quality assurance and there are no severe bugs filed against that package, then it will migrate into testing. and that's a separate archive, and eventually testing will be frozen, and that becomes the next stable Debian release. I'm gonna publish these slides so you can look at these details later on yourself. Then there are also security releases in Debian and in Ubuntu, and they follow a slightly different quality assurance model, and the challenge of course for security releases is to balance the urgency of getting the new release out into the hands of users against the inherent kind of safety and quality assurance that comes over time when you do things a bit slower and you make releases available in unstable first and then it moves into a stable repository. The security releases are done directly into the stable repositories. Debian is notoriously famous for this Debian policy. It spans over 150 pages, and it's something that everybody who uploads software to Debian are kind of required to know and follow. And it's not just that document, there's also a huge amount of other guidelines and documents around, and all of these kind of define what Debian considers as good quality for software, and all of the packages need to follow them to ensure that as a whole the distribution and everything that's inside the distribution is of a high standard and works well for the end users. So these policies and guidelines kind of sometimes force the package maintainer in Debian to do something differently or better than what upstream has done. And that's one layer of quality assurance. Then of course there is a huge amount of software systems running in Debian doing automatic quality assurance as well. All of these systems are online and completely transparent, so you can go and check them out. I'm going to publish my slides so you can then go and check all these links in the slides yourself. And there are dashboards that are for the maintainers so that they can see an overview of their packages, and then there are dashboards that are tailored from the point of view of one specific package and all the Q&A going on for that package. Here, just to illustrate, I'm not going to go through the details here, but just to illustrate, this is how the MySQL and MariaDB packaging team dashboard looks like at the moment. So the people who are doing MySQL packaging and MariaDB packaging are all in the same team here in under the same umbrella. And this is the tracker page for MariaDB 10.5. And here you can see that there is information about the package in general. There is information that what does this upstream source package and packaging in Debian, what binary packages does it generate in Debian. There is the history of when what versions and revisions were uploaded. There are notifications for the packager of what kind of quality issues there are that should be addressed. There are links to bugs here and links to all the other QA systems, and also if there are some issues with the package preventing it from migrating to unstable to testing, they will show up on this page. So let's start with the first and most basic quality assurance system in Debian, that is the Debian Builder. So in Debian, when you upload new software to the archives, you upload it as source, and then the Debian infrastructure will then compile it into the binary packages. And here you can see that Debian has several official architectures, and all packages must work for all these architectures. And then there are even more unofficial architectures which are dimmed in this screenshot here, and MariaDB 10.5 is currently building and passing the test suite on more platforms than ever before, but still not on every single one, but the remaining ones are perhaps not that important. They are not even all using the Linux kernel. Then there is another build system which is called reproducible builds, and this is for security purposes and for ensuring the supply chain security. So the goal here is that a package is considered of high quality if the package, when you build it, will always produce exactly the same binary. So if you have the same version and you build it on the same architecture, the resulting binary packages should be identical. And you can use this to kind of do builds in different places and then compare that to the binaries you get from Debian, and if they differ, then there's a chance that they have been manipulated on the way. But with this you can rule that out. Debian has also this its own CI system called auto-package test. So package maintainers can choose what those auto-package tests in practice are, and you can go to ci.debian.net to have an overview and check out whatever package you want. And on the left you see here a screenshot from MariaDB on there, and here on the right you can see a screenshot from the tracker page, how it looks like immediately after a new upload of MariaDB, because in addition to running MariaDB's own auto-package test, this system will also trigger the auto-package test of all those packages that depend on MariaDB. And this is a way to kind of make sure that there are no regressions introduced by uploads of new software. Very extensive. Ubuntu has the same, it's using the same tests and the same software. The only difference is that it gets triggered by changes to the Ubuntu archives instead. Then there's a tool called buildbot, and this takes the binary packages, it installs them, upgrades them, uninstalls them, checks that there are no stray files left behind, and does this kind of basic packaging operations, and they must all work for a package to pass the QA. There's also a tool called Lintian. You can run it as a command line tool on your own computer, and there's also an online version that publishes reports for all the packages in Debian. And it includes thousands and thousands of small tests, from everything from spelling and copyright issues to things like checking how the symbols in a binary library are versioned and stuff like that. And some of these tests are Debian specific, that the package follows the policy in Debian, but many of these tests also find issues which are interesting for upstream, like spelling errors obviously should be fixed as upstream as possible. Then we also have, specifically for MariaDB in Debian, we have this CI pipeline that's built and integrated with salsa.debian.org, which is an instance of GitLab. And this triggers on every commit we do to the Debian packaging repository. This runs the same Q&A tools as the Debian infrastructure will run on the package after the upload, but this runs it on every commit, so we know the result of those tests before we do an upload. And in addition, there are also many custom tests here. We test that, for example, encrypted connections work, and we test that third-party software that were built against the MariaDB C connector continue working, and we test almost every scenario of upgrading from a previous MariaDB or MySQL version to the one in the commit. Then we also have the users who are filing bugs against packages they are using in Debian. This is the current state of MariaDB 10.3 in Debian, and it's going pretty well, and there's not that many bugs anymore. And we also need to keep an eye on the same thing on Launchpad, which is the system where Ubuntu users file bugs when they encounter some in Ubuntu. Some users might file the bugs directly upstream at MariaDB's own Jira, but some users just by default file most of their issues in the distribution's own bug trackers. All of the issues we find, we try to solve, and we try to solve them so that we can upload to Debian a new version where the issue is solved. So the fixes go to Debian itself first, but eventually we try to upstream everything. And we try to upstream everything as upstream as possible. So obviously most of the fixes go to MariaDB itself, but then also lots of fixes go to the connector C library and to upstreams like RocksDB and Roomgun, so on. So it's not just Debian users who benefit from the Q&A done in Debian, it's also all of the users of MariaDB that then eventually benefits for all the quality assurance done in Debian and Ubuntu. There's quite a lot of work, so we are always happy to see new contributors, but this is also very interesting and rewarding work because you can see the results of your work. It's very concrete and you know that millions of people are benefiting from what you're doing immediately. Here are some links if you want to join, and that was it. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you, Otto, for the presentation on Debian, Ubuntu, and how we do things. I'd actually like to just ask a few questions on the security releases. You mentioned that doing a security release is a balance of speed and QA. How's it generally worked out?
Well, most of the time it works out just fine. There has been a couple of upstream MariaDB releases that were security releases and included regressions, but luckily those were discovered like on the same day as the upstream release was, so they didn't have time to propagate into Debian and Ubuntu.
Okay, so you had time to stop it there. Okay, so what's the usual release delay when you're doing a security release?
Well, I do get an email when there's a security release in the works, so I can basically start preparing it the same day it's out. But then you need to collaborate with the security teams of the distributions and get permission, like pre-approval to upload and such. So I would say it varies between 3 days and 10 days, maybe something like this.
Okay, I'm just getting it out. Do you get many bug reports coming out of security-specific releases?
Not really. The ones that we've shipped in Debian and Ubuntu have gone pretty well. So if there are like severe regressions, those have been catched by upstream pretty quickly before we've had time to upload that version to distribution. So security releases, it's a challenge to balance between the kind of the urgency to get it out and then the benefits of doing it slightly slower to have time for people to discover issues. But I think we managed that balance pretty well, and the end result has worked fine for the distribution users.
Okay. I noticed when Sergej's talk about how they do security releases, he talked about that MariaDB's release cycle is following like the Oracle CPU release cycle of theirs, so that MariaDB releases have actually, for the most part, included all the Oracle MySQL security fixes that were applicable. How has this impacted on the Debian releases of MariaDB?
Well, I think it's worked pretty well, because if you don't consider that, then you are kind of forced to do additional releases. And I think the root problem here is that the Oracle CPUs are pretty much void of any actual information of what is the security issue and what is not. And I think that most of those that are labeled as security issues are actually not real security issues. It's just that there's a bug that makes the server crash, and they seem to have an internal policy that whatever crashes the server is potentially a security issue, even though there's no real vector for attacking there. So So
yeah,
you kind of have to ship it because they've been labeled as security, but it's not often actually urgent. But I think that how MariaDB is now doing the timing is an optimal way to do it.
Okay. When you talk about Debian's policies and the 100 pages, you talked about this as being delivering a quality in the policy. How do you see the most significant bits of quality from a user perspective?
Well, the manual is huge and there are lots of policies in it, but I think most of it is things that are like generically good quality. Like, for example, that when you install files on the system, that their locations follow the Linux standard base standard, and that the places are sensible, and that the names of the commands are sensible. If you have a distribution and you have commands, then you most of the time want that the commands somehow relate to the application name, that you don't have a, for example, a command called convert, because if you have a convert command on your system and there's no like way to tell what software package that relates to, it's way too generic of a name.
Of course it's from ImageMagick. Anyway, so you mentioned when you're part of a team on the package MySQL maintainers group within Debian, but a lot of the commits you've actually done yourself. What kind of collaboration takes place in the team?
Well, it's been fairly silent recently because the people packaging MySQL haven't been very active in recent years, and I think that from a Debian point of view, it's declining the quality of the MySQL packages, and it's a big package and it's a complex beast, so it's not something that's attracting a lot of new contributors. So most of the time the contributors we have are actually people doing porting it to different architectures and more advanced users who then contribute to make sure that MariaDB works in their use case and on their platforms.
Okay, that's a good sign. And I guess on the architectures, when we talk about the Debian builder, you mentioned there's a bunch of official architectures, and the Debian policy is what must always work on the architectures. How does that work when the upstream doesn't exactly have all of them?
Well, you can, if you specifically want, then you can omit some architectures. For example, for RocksDB, we have that it works only for 64-bit systems. So obviously, we can't ship RocksDB plugin on 32-bit systems. But in general, most software do work on all of these platforms if they just have a little bit of attention. And usually the Debian porters people are pretty good at finding out what are the small tweaks you need to do to the source to get it compiling and running on the different architectures. And I think that also the main architectures benefit from that work, because often the reason that it doesn't compile on a certain architecture is that you are doing something wrong and you're violating the C standard. And if you're doing everything according to standards and how you're supposed to do it, then all the platforms will build it.
Yeah, I agree. Formerly doing IBM power stuff, it's a lot of simple rules just to get you over that basic hurdle, and most of it comes down to adhering to the standard. So you mentioned in the Debian builder there's a bunch of tests that actually get run. Which parts do you test in that CI process?
So in the build process in Debian, we are running the basic main suite, just like if you build MariaDB yourself and you don't do anything special, it will immediately after the build run MariaDB's own test suite. So we are reusing that to run it directly after the builds to ensure that whatever was built is actually runnable.
Okay, and so this, does a lot of assuming that, the upstream MariaDB has done a more collaborative, more comprehensive, should I say, testing of it. Anyway.
Well,
so
at the moment, the main suite works pretty well on all platforms. So.
Yeah, I know they jump on pretty quickly on failures on that one. So what kind of collaboration goes on between unofficial architecture maintainers?
Well, when I do an upload and I see that something is failing, then I file a bug inside Debian, and then I try to make it as easy as possible for the porters to discover that. And obviously they don't have MariaDB background, so I attach instructions how to build MariaDB and which version exactly is the failing one and things like that. And then I try to attract the porters to take a look, and quite often it's something fairly simple that's failing, and when that one or two things is fixed, then the build works. And the porters, either they tell me just some hints what's going wrong, or they submit a patch via email, or sometimes they even open merge request on Salsa, which is the collaboration platform.
System. Sure. Yeah. Yep. You talked a bit about reproducible builds as part of a supply chain security, and what people normally actually care about reproducible builds. How did it sort of come to be in the open source ecosystem?
Well, I think that's a fairly new thing, maybe 4 years old, and it is a fairly advanced level of security if you don't trust the supply chain and you want to figure out ways how to validate that the supply chain has worked and you don't get backdoored binaries. And the software is in a quite central place in society, and we have rumors and examples of official binaries being backdoored and stuff. So I think that there is a demand for reproducible builds, and that's going to help protect the supply chain. And actually quite a large part of all the software in Debian is already reproducible. And even in MariaDB, everything else apart from the RocksDB module and Murunga module can build in a reproducible way. So we are pretty close to meeting this requirement.
Right. So on the upstream focus on that, you mentioned those two plugins are incompatible currently because they have like date stamps or something in that. How consistent is the rest of the build process from the MariaDB upstream on reproducibility?
Well, everything else works. There was initially, when we started looking into this, there was a couple of things where there was like timestamps embedded, or the directory name of where the build is was embedded in the resulting binary, but those have been cleaned up, and nobody has introduced anything new recently that would break reproducible builds. So I think the state is pretty good.
Those would actually still be like paths. They would still actually occur in the debug builds and cease the debug information. So I guess that's just excluded.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
I think that the domain of reproducible builds is perhaps something that's not the highest priority in many places. It's like an additional security requirement, which is not something people think about from day to day. But
I guess, with open source and particularly Debian is like a very smooth lining the supply chain to the user, that sort of the ease of it sort of makes it attractive from a backdoor point of view.
Yeah, and if you're like a government agency or something and you're using Debian, then perhaps you don't want to trust that the Debian builders have not been compromised, and you want to do your own parallel builds, and maybe you want to compare. So actually, if you want to have maximum security, you could, instead of ever
fetching any binaries from Debian, you would only take the source code and build everything yourself. But I think that also from a security research point of view, it's nice that there is a way to detect if the binaries have been backdoored. So as long as that's not happening, then there's more trust in the supply chain. And also the mere existence of reproducible build then kind of excludes that whoever wants to attack the infrastructure can't use just simple backdooring of binaries.
Yeah, it sort of makes it obvious, and that sort of further complements, I guess, the checksums and the other processes that are a part of the packaging as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess moving on, talked about like the ci.debian.net and the auto package tests actually build a lot of packages that depend on MariaDB, and that's kind of the obvious step for CI from a distribution point of view. How stable is this, and sort of what sort of kinds of problems can occur?
Well, it has worked surprisingly well. There are very few false positives. And if there are false positives, you can always contact the release manager, and then they can add exceptions for the tests if you want to get, if there is truly a false positive. But most of the time, if the Debian CI tests have failed, it has been a sign of an actual failure in either MariaDB or the way how something that uses MariaDB, how it depends on MariaDB. It hasn't been using the correct library names or something like that.
No.
So I
I've seen it before that there's been like deprecated APIs that have been deprecated for so many years, and all of a sudden people turn them off, and that's actually, I guess, the stage where it's noticed.
I think it's definitely valuable that the stuff that have been detected by that system is most of the time real issues, and the mere existence that you have hundreds and hundreds of depending packages that test against MariaDB on every upload and nothing breaks is very cool, because it gives you a confidence that things are unlikely to. At least
you've got a good confidence that the dependent packages are testing against the stuff they're linking to. Is that right? You're fairly confident that the packages that depend on MariaDB are testing it. Yep. Okay, on the CI pipelines, I think it's been just in the last couple of years you've put actually a lot of effort into making this additional stage of the testing framework. You mentioned encryption, the connector C ABI. Was there something else?
So Debian started using its own GitLab instance, like I think two and a half years ago. So this Salsa system is salsa.debian.org is a pretty new one. And immediately when it came out, people started also using the GitLab CI features of it. And also in MariaDB packaging, we started using it first, very simple things. And over the past years, it has evolved into quite a huge testing thing with 45 jobs at the moment. And and we are testing the same kind of things that are common in the bug reports filed in Debian. And
okay, just wondering how you derive that.
That's kind of the motivation why we are testing it. For example, people were complaining that some of the encrypted connection settings were not working, so we built a test for it, and then with that we get complete confidence that everything that's supposed to work in the build is working.
Okay. So what's next in the CI pipeline tests?
Well, I don't have any ideas at the moment. It's pretty complete. I think that whatever new bugs people file, that probably dictates what we want to test in the CI pipeline.
Okay, on bug reports, you mentioned you kind of cross-check Debian bugs with Ubuntu bugs and see what's going on. Do you look further on to other derivative distributions to see what bugs they are getting?
Well, I'm not following what other distributions, what bugs are filed there. but occasionally I go and check out how the packaging is done in other distributions to learn if they are doing something special.
Okay. Yep, so they're all easy to find. Cool.
Also a mailing list for packagers in MariaDB, and sometimes there are a couple of discussions there where people coordinate and discuss the best practices of how to.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That, you know, obviously distributions have similar challenges in presenting MariaDB to their user base and complying with their own policies.
Yeah.
So I was wondering how that gets discussed.
Yeah, so obviously, even though the packaging formats are different, like DEB and RPM and others, still I think that the goals for the distributions are very similar. Like you want to have high quality, you want to have all the files and their locations and naming sensible and standardized, and you want to make sure that the upgrade path is always smooth from all previous versions. And I think that the discussions there have been related to how to smoothly upgrade when there have been significant changes in upstream MariaDB.
Okay. So as kind of a final question, how's your assessment on MariaDB upstream? Are we doing the right things, and what would you like to see improved?
Well, I like the fact that people are pretty active on Zulip. So if I get stuck with something in the packaging or in building or whatever, I get pretty quickly a response on Zulip and some pointers on what to look next. So that's pretty good. But then what's not working that well is that there are quite a lot of bug reports that initially they might get some attention, but then in the long run they go ignored for a long time. And there should be some room to improve kind of the discipline and the prioritization of issues that at the moment I think that it's some kind of a challenge that there are so many things that are so high priority that you don't actually have priorities.
It certainly feels like that sometimes. So yes, thank you for the feedback, and thank you for your talk, and much appreciated coming along to the mini server fest.
Thanks for inviting.
Now on to the pure user perspective. These slots are not slide decks, but pure interviews, dialogues. First in line we have Sunil Kamath from Microsoft. So this slot in the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition is an interview with Sunil Kamath from Microsoft. Hi Sunil and welcome.
Hi Kaj, nice to be here.
So I'll tell the audience a bit about the level of preparation here. The US just had Thanksgiving, so it took a while to set up this interview. And things are, of course, complicated a bit by time zones between Munich, where I am based, and where are you based, Sunil?
I'm based out of Seattle in Redmond.
Right, so coordination obviously wasn't trivial. And just when I had flown from Germany to Finland yesterday evening, I got the news that my daughter, who is soon a medical doctor, has tested positive for COVID. So today has gone all sorting out quarantine matters from me, since my daughter and me met a lot the last few days before I flew to Finland. And that's sorry about that, Sunil. That's why you haven't got any of the questions in advance.
No worries. That's very sad to hear. Hopefully she will become better soon.
I think she will. So you, the viewer, will see Sunil answering questions even more spontaneously than we planned, because I haven't shared any of the questions beforehand. But now let's go to the matter at hand. The topic for our MariaDB Server Minifest is the release policy of MariaDB. So it's not about the functionality of MariaDB Server, it's about major and minor releases, how often we release them and how our users pick the releases and decide about their own upgrade policy. So Sunil, which versions of MariaDB is Microsoft using currently on Azure and elsewhere?
On Azure, we support multiple major versions of MariaDB, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and we're continuously looking to add more latest versions as customers keep asking us for those support.
Okay, so you haven't mentioned an old version like 10.1. Do you also go to the very newest one, like now we're on 10.5.8? Do you have 10.5 as well?
Yeah, I mean, we are actually working right now to add support for 10.5 as well. Again, I mean, we prioritize these decisions also based on our customer asks and needs, and we have started getting requests, and we are actually in the process of integrating and supporting 10.5 as well.
Okay, good to hear. So then what about the minor versions? Now, obviously, I know most about 10.5, and the 10.5 current release is 10.5.8. I forgot what the latest 10.4 is, and much less the latest 10.3 or 10.2. But we come now about once a quarter with a new minor release. Do you upgrade to all of them, or just selected minor upgrades?
No, I mean, see, we treat minor updates quite seriously, because the principle behind the minor updates is bug fixes, security patches, etc. So we strive to patch or automatically patch minor versions within 3 months of it becoming generally available. So that's kind of the time period that we shoot for. But customers don't even know, right? So it's automatically, as part of our monthly automatic maintenance, we integrate with the new minor patches, and customers automatically get it. So they don't have to worry about the patching of the minor releases.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a schedule of your own. Once a month you do certain things, and your goal is that the release of a MariaDB server won't be more than at most 3 months old, the minor release. Is that the case?
Most often that's the case. I mean, of course, depending upon the minor release, we go through extensive testing and making sure that the reliability, the performance, and resiliency is all rock solid and bulletproof, if you will. And sometimes we uncover bugs, sometimes we uncover issues, and that means that we got to go fix them and make sure that it is stable before we automatically patch every databases on the public cloud.
Yes, so that you actually anticipated one of my questions, or my next question. So what happens if when you test a new release that you encounter a bug? What do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, we of course have to fix those bugs. We work with the community. We either patch, we discover what needs to happen, and if it happens to be a bug in MariaDB itself, we work with the community, making sure that those patches are well understood and integrated into the open source release. And while that happens, we also have the ability to go patch it ourselves and make sure that we don't delay patching of those bug fixes.
So from your perspective, what's the optimal frequency for getting bug fixes or bug fix releases, shall we say? Is it like, would the release frequency, the current release frequency, unless there's some critical security bug or something like that, is one minor release a quarter for each of the major releases? So is that sort of too seldom or too often, or just about right?
No, I mean, see, we classify the patching and the bug fixes into multiple buckets, right? So especially when there are day zero type of security vulnerabilities, we patch it immediately and make sure that our customer databases are patched and protected from those vulnerabilities. Otherwise, we have a monthly cadence where we push patches worldwide to all the regions where we operate the service. So every monthly cadence, we roll out patches, and that patches include new function. It could include new functionality, bug fixes in the infrastructure, and also like sometimes carries the minor version updates as well. So it's a much more bigger payload. Of course, depends upon month to month, but our cycle of rolling out is monthly, so we iterate very, very fast through our CI/CD process.
So when you're looking at the current state of MariaDB Server, specifically the current stability, so what's your hope for MariaDB's further development? Do you think that the focus should be on spending time to fix bugs primarily, or create new functionality? I mean, this is of course a balance, but where would you prefer the development to be seen, on fixing bugs or on new functionality?
Well, I mean, I see that there has to be a good, healthy balance of both. Of course, bug fixes is looking backwards, and new functionality is looking forward. And not to ignore the fact that the database is a lifeline for the application, right? It stores critical data, whether like you're hosting a website with MariaDB, and if there is an issue with MariaDB, the website is down, and there's a huge impact of the business, or it's a large retailer that is running financial transactions against MariaDB database, and if that database is down, it's loss of revenue to that business. So stability, resiliency is super important, and also is important is performance, right? Like as we ship new functionality, what is the performance expectations for using that capability? So given now we are in a cloud world, we also have realized, if you can contrast that with the past decades, where developers and the development cycle used to be more like a waterfall model, with a big set of changes getting released and rolled out all at once. The blast radius of the bugs was also pretty high. Right now, with continuous integration, continuous development, faster iterations, we can ship new functionality with higher quality at a much faster pace. And it also is leading to better, more stable as well, because the pull requests are much smaller in size, and then they're being extensively tested. It's a balance, I would say, Kaj. We have to have functionality as well as, of course, make sure that the functionality that is being pushed is of utmost highest quality.
So I'm trying to read between the lines there that you're saying that stability is hugely important and performance is hugely important, but you don't seem to be unhappy with the current stability or the current performance. So in that sense, I hear what you're saying or I interpret what you're saying as go right ahead and do more functionality. We're not terribly suffering right now. Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, I mean, it's a bit subjective. I mean, performance is a subjective topic, right? Because every application needs more performance. The more performance, the better it is for the application. So continuous focus on performance is of utmost importance. And then also the ease of getting that performance, right? How do you make getting that performance easy without having to configure and tune a bunch of knobs? Because not everyone kind of understands how these different knobs work all together. So making that easy and simple to achieve the performance that developers need is something that I believe should be a continuous focus, and which I think there is definitely a room for improvement there.
Yep, I would agree. So this, I mean, I'm not saying that you are claiming that performance is perfect and ease of use is perfect. I'm more hearing that you're not worrying too much about stability. The the level of bugginess is okay, but you can always improve how easy it is to set it up in such a way that you get performance, and that's of course an important focus area for MariaDB. So, I see you nodding. Thanks for that. So then you were also touching a subject of what is quality. So I was going to ask you, what does quality mean for you? But you sort of already answered it. Quality means that you get something that is easy to use and that is performant and that doesn't crash. Is that your definition of quality of MariaDB Server?
Partially, and let's not ignore security, right? Databases hold the most critical sensitive data, and security is something that is of utmost importance and is of the highest bar, if you will, and then comes performance, stability, and so on. Yeah, I mean, I think except for the security that you didn't mention, but yes, all those are the more core elements of how we define quality.
Okay, so that's very clear. So then I have another sort of definition kind of thing. I can see some pull requests being portrayed as bug fixes because it was earlier, shall we say, bad specifications or crucially missing functionality. But I can see the very same pull request being not positioned as a bug fix, but as a new feature because it adds some kind of a capability. So the borderline between a bug fix and new functionality isn't always knife sharp. And the reason I'm saying this is that we need to have some kind of a guideline what one can do to a point release. So now we're on 10.5.8. What can we do to 10.5.9, and with what kind of functionality do we need to wait until 10.6, until the next major release? So what's your guideline there on what is acceptable new functionality or major bug fix in a point release, in a minor release?
Yeah, in a minor release, what customers care about is not breaking my application, right? So that's most important, and making sure that we don't break any compatibility to the application, and also the new functionality doesn't expose new issues or further bugs. So typically we don't anticipate and expect, and this is also customers don't expect a lot like new functionality in the dot release. Dot release is meant for bug fixes, security patches, essentially making the quality better. And it doesn't necessarily also mean that you cannot roll out new functionality. Yes, you can always roll out new functionality, but then do it in such a way that it is behind a feature switch, it is behind not in the mainline code, or with an optional capability to kind of turn on a knob to if developers want to test that functionality, but don't make it the default. So don't change anything in like default. And add new functionality in the minor dot releases, and keep the big functionality always in the major releases. That's what customers ask for.
Makes a lot of sense. So I'm not sure whether this is applicable specifically for your scenario, but what about backporting new features to old releases? Like a feature has become well accepted in 10.5, and then you have a customer on 10.4 who really would like to have this feature, but doesn't want, for usual reasons, the reasons of stability, doesn't want to upgrade to 10.5. They do want to stay on 10.4. So what's your view on such a scenario?
I mean, I think there will always be customers that would want that, and I think the best way to solve that is faster cadences for major release versions. And That's what many other open source communities have also embraced. Like for example, if previously it would take 2 years, 3 years for the next major version, now many open source communities are iterating faster with major updates coming like almost like at a yearly cadence. That's the right way or a model to think of in terms of pushing new functionality, so that we don't get into a situation of having to backport or support new functionality in the older releases.
Yeah, so the main provider of, shall we say, from a roadmap perspective of MariaDB service, of course, MariaDB Corporation, and their cadence is now what you say, once a year for the major release. So you would sort of advise against this backporting, and your recipe is don't backport, go with a new version, right?
If you want new functionality, go to the new version. That's the right model that works from both the step, like especially as we look at from the quality perspective, that makes the perfect sense.
Cool. So any advice to us on how to improve our quality? What's your, do you have a wish list for us?
Well, I mean, ease of achieving performance, and how do you and making sure that newer releases get like follow a model of smaller pull requests. Making sure that there are robust continuous integration, like testing tools, and as much as like I don't have any like top concerns around the stability of the latest MariaDB releases. Overall, I think it's going in the right direction, and if you are able to address the ease of use and ease to achieve performance, I think it would be a big step forward for MariaDB.
That sounds great. So I think we're nearing the conclusion of this. Any final words or other ideas? What did I not ask and should have asked you?
You asked a lot of good questions, Kaj. I appreciate those line of questions, and I also appreciate the fact that you're raising a very important topic around quality. I'm glad that we are having this type of a discussion, because it's always a conversation about like this new functionality, this new capability, and quality, of course, doesn't get necessarily the same level of attention. I'm glad that I'm very, very happy to kind of see and witness the specific focus and an opportunity to come and share our point of view in terms of reinforcing that message about the importance of quality, and also how we could possibly look at making that better in the future MariaDB releases. So glad to be here with you today.
Great, thank you for those kind concluding words, Sunil Kamath from Microsoft. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaj.
The last slot is a highly interesting one, as this user has very much skin in the MariaDB game. It's DBS Bank, one of Asia's leading banks based in Singapore. DBAs have switched from Oracle to MariaDB Server and run their infrastructure on MariaDB Server. So go right ahead, Kamala Kannan, Anna Turai. So, this slot in the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition is an interview with Kamala Kannan and Anna Turai from DBS Bank in Singapore. Hi, Kamal, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Good to see the Minifest during this COVID situation. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So, the topic for our MariaDB Server Minifest continues to be MariaDB's release policy. It's not about functionality, it's about major and minor releases and how often we release them and how often our users pick the releases and decide about their upgrade policies. So Kamal, can you briefly describe the platform, including the machines and the operating systems, where DBS Bank applies MariaDB?
Okay, our MariaDB now, our environment mostly it's in Linux. It's a Red Hat Linux. We have Linux in multiple platforms. It can be physical, it can be VPC, our virtual private cloud, or VMware farm, but it's all under Linux OS.
Okay. And as for the infrastructure still, what kind of high availability software and perhaps hardware are used to achieve HA?
Okay, software-wise, we rely on the MariaDB Max Scale for high availability. On hardware and the platform-wise, we have the VMware farm. So VMware handles fully. If there is a failure or any issue with the server, VMware vMotions to the different pod or different data center also. We have a data center active. Mm-hmm. So even if the whole data center goes down, VMware manages it. So we have multiple levels of HA.
And what about like replication and Galera and all of that? I mean, you mentioned max scale, but what about replication?
Replication, we have the master slave replication. For most of the cases, we used to have one slave, but for some scenario, we have two slaves. So all the write operation goes to the master. If I want to generate the reports and all, read operation goes to one of the slave.
Mm-hmm.
So for the very critical applications, we have one master and two slave.
Okay. So then remember that we're talking now about major and minor server versions, but basically the first fundamental question is, which server version are you on and how long have you been so?
Okay, we started this journey in 2015, right? We came into MariaDB. We started with 10.1. Then the most stable version for us is 10.2. Then every year we have a new major upgrade. We have some servers in 10.3 and 10.4. We are eagerly waiting for 10.5. Just last month, our POC testing all went fine in 10.5. We have started upgrading to 10.5. So our versions are spread across 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4. But our plan is now move everything to 10.5 in next 6 months.
Interesting. Yeah, so this means then that a couple of applications are on one release and another set of applications are on another major release, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what then happens inside the major releases? Let's say that we're talking about an application on 10.3. Do you upgrade that 10.3 for point releases, for minor releases? And if so, how frequently?
Okay, we see what is covered in that minor release. If there is security fix, we apply immediately. It will be in next 1 or 2 months. But if the minor release covers some features enhancements, and if it is required for us, we push ahead. Else, we bundle it into the major release upgrade.
Makes sense to me. So another detailed question on that. Let's say that you have a bug in one application, but not in the other one. Both are on 10.3, and because of that one application, you upgrade MariaDB 10.3 for that one. Would you then always do the upgrade for the other ones as well using 10.3? So do you have just across the board one major release for all the apps running it?
Yes, we will migrate. Since we have thousands of databases, we cannot do it in weeks or months.
Yeah.
The complete cycle takes at least 9 months to 12 months. But by end of the year, all the servers will be in the latest minor release.
Mm-hmm. So you evidently have several major releases at the same time. So and as I hear you want to go to 10.5 as quickly as you can. But what does the decision process look like? I mean, what goes on in your evaluation process when you upgrade?
Mainly it is features on the performance. 10.5 has a lot of features for us, which we are asking you, Monty, Michael Howard, and all. We have the very important feature, the object store compatibility. Then the new engine in 10.5, the InnoDB engine and the column store engine, performance is very good. Based on our initial POC, performance has improved at least 3 times. Then additionally, there are a lot of features. We can have in earlier versions, we can have decimal points up to 18 digits. Now it is increasing to 48 and all. Likewise, then the backup, initially in the 10.1, 10.2 and all, backup used to lock the tables. Now the recent releases backup has improved a lot. It is no lock-free backup. So we go based on the features we have. Since 10.5 has a lot of important features which we are waiting for a while, that's why we are pushing everything to 10.5 now.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So you're driven a lot by the functionality and the performance and all of that. Makes sense. So you were saying you're doing proof of concept. So you need, of course, also to gain confidence in the stability. So what's your testing process like for a new major release?
We have thousands of databases running in MariaDB. We will select few databases, few in OLTP, the online transaction processing, few on the OLAP, analytical processing, few more on the report generation, heavy batch processing. We select these different kind of databases. We run one round of regression testing in all kinds of databases. When all goes fine for this pilot testing, then we move ahead with the actual migrations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one question that I'm always curious about for everybody using MariaDB, it's the stability and the balance between stability and the new functionality, because obviously everybody would want both, as stable as possible, no bugs and good performance, but also people need new functionality. So what's your view of the balance that MariaDB is striking between fixing bugs and improving stability and adding new functionality?
I think over the years, MariaDB has matured a lot. We are in MariaDB for last 5 years, from 2015 till 20. Every year, our growth is almost a double, tripling. The reason is it is stable. It is highly stable. Performance improving in every version. This is the main. What is the third point you are asking? How you balance?
Well, balance between new functionality. Like, let's say that we're now contemplating, should we put? We have, of course, everybody has limited resources, and so does MariaDB. Should MariaDB put those limited? How should we distribute those limited resources? More towards new functionality, or more towards fixing any remaining issues?
I don't see any issues recently. If we see the cases Jira raised with MariaDB, issues are very less recently. Recently means it's since last year also we can say. Instead, our request more coming towards the new features. Example, we were asking for the Kafka integration for a while. Earlier, we used to use a third-party tool to pick the data changes and inject into the other environments. Now, since we have Kafka integrated, whatever the changes happening in database, real time we can able to stream the data. So now it's the performance and new features driving more.
Mm-hmm. Good to know. So when thinking about the release policy, I think one quickly comes to the question about what quality really is. And the quality is, everybody thinks quality is a good thing to strive for, but people use this word without really defining what they mean. So what constitutes quality for, from your perspective? What is your sort of definition of how MariaDB server quality should be looked upon? And then the follow-up question is, how does MariaDB fulfill that definition? But first, please, what does quality mean to you?
Okay. Earlier question I was answering, right? This OLTP, OLAP, and different kind of platforms. Whenever I get a new major or minor release, when I do the testing, if the regression passes fully, quality is good for me. This is the first thing. Second, ours is a financial institution, so we are always demanding. So always there is scope for improvement. We always push your guys to improve more and more. That is better for us, better for you, better for everyone.
Good. So I'm then looking at like the cadence, the frequency of updates, and I'm looking at the frequency of updates both for the major releases, which is once a year, and the frequency of the minor releases, which now has started to converge to be once every 3 months. So what's your view on that frequency? Is it too rare? Is it too often? Is it just about right?
This is the right decision, I think. Even the other major industry players also doing this way only. Major release should be every year. Minor release earlier, depending on the urgency, sometimes we used to have releases in between also, but quarterly minor release is best. But some of the industry leaders, they still do 2 years once or 3 years once. But in this fast changing world, in our lot of requirements, waiting for 2-3 years for a release is too long.
Yeah, so
when we need something new feature, new enhancement, the major release every year is best. That's what I feel.
So one of the consequences of too slow release cycles is the need for backporting. So we have a number of users of MariaDB who don't want to upgrade. They are on, let's say, 10.3, and they know that 10.4 has, or 10.5 has functionality that they would like to have, but for some reason they would rather not rock the boat. They would want 10.3 to contain this one single feature that they really urge for. So they would want that to be backported. So what's your thinking about under what conditions do you think we can and should backport new features to old releases, or is that the wrong way to go? Should you just say no to backporting and instead upgrade to the latest version?
My view is backporting should be avoided. In a way, if we are backporting everything, means that already becomes the latest N version. Instead, we can upgrade.
That was a very, very clear statement. So another area where I think there's a gray zone is when we have a particular release. Let's say now we are on 10.5.8, and then there's a fix to something, but it's not like a security bug or a crashing bug where it's really, really clear that it is a bug and not a feature. Let's say it's a specification which was sloppy before, and a crucial missing functionality or anything which points out the fact that the borderline between a bug and a bug fix and a feature is a bit of a gray zone. So how do you look upon that? Where should we draw the line when it comes to fixing stuff that can be either portrayed as a bug fix or as a new feature?
For me, even though you say it's a bit closer, what I feel is we should be able to draw a clear line. If my application, if my database is running fine in production, if it breaks, then it is a bug. That one has to be fixed very fast.
Yeah.
But if I need some new feature, then we cannot categorize it as a bug. If nothing is breaking my production, then those all can be parked under enhancement new features.
Okay, so that makes sense, but you're not the only user of, say, 10.5. Let's say that your application is not crashing, yours is doing just fine, but there's another user who cannot use 10.5 because of some crucial thing that they think it's a bug. You might think it's a feature. So the line of thinking here would be that as long as you are not disturbed by the change, it should be fine to fix what the other user considers to be a bug. Do you subscribe to that reasoning?
It's not me or the database. It can be any database across the companies. If a running live database, if it breaks, then we can consider it as a bug. Mm-hmm. Whether I may be using that feature, I may not be using. If I use that feature, I may hit the bug. If I don't use the feature, I may not hit the bug. But the other user may be using that feature, they will hit the bug. Those things we can call it as a bug. But if the database is not live, it is not failing in a live environment, then those all can be parked under enhancement, new features.
I think you're very efficient in putting light on those gray zones and telling us that they're not that gray after all. So that's very good. Any wishes when it comes to the release schedule and the quality from DBS Bank's side?
Release schedule, we are fine. Major release every year, minor releases quarterly. That is good. For quality, as I said earlier, there is always scope for improvement. We should keep on improving further. Over the years, I have seen that improvement also. I told, right, we are the user for last 5 years. We have an enterprise license agreement with you. Every year, we host Monty in Singapore for our MariaDB conference. Then I have visited the US office also. So we are working closely, we are partners. So everything is good, but this partnership helps us to improve the quality also. It is improving steadily.
Any further messages related to the release policy or something I forgot to ask you?
For release policy, we have covered everything. It is good. But I would like to see MariaDB, compared to other industry players, we can do much better in entering many industries, say finance or medical or universities. Or MariaDB should, I like to see MariaDB extends further. With so much capability features compared with all the industry major databases, MariaDB should be moving much faster.
Great. Kamala Kanananatura, I thank you very much for your views and your description of MariaDB at DBS Bank in Singapore. Thank you, Kamal.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting this interview.
And now for the final slot of today, where it all comes together, the panel session where we ask for feedback on how MariaDB can improve in the eyes of the user community. Welcome to the panel discussion at the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition. Our topic still remains the MariaDB release schedule, and the plan was to take all the presenters and all the interviewers and contrast the various starting points and vantage points against each other. But since the speakers represented time zones from Canberra, Singapore, Cape Town, various places in Europe, and on both US coasts, not everybody could make it to the joint recording time. So if you've seen the six slots before this panel, you know that half of them were internal by MariaDB people, and the other half was external with Debian, Microsoft, and DBS Bank representing various user constituencies. So all of those slots were about how we work now and how it is seen by our users. We got some kudos, and this is, of course, gives us a great feeling. The MariaDB Foundation obviously wants more users, and current users saying that they're happy with MariaDB Server is a great testimony. But the purpose of this panel is different. This is about getting feedback on what we can do better. And that's why I would like to first welcome Giuseppe Mascia to our panel. Welcome, Giuseppe. Do we have Giuseppe?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Happy to. So you're here in the role of Jiminy Cricket. So for those who do not know Pinocchio in English, you might know him as Grillo Parlante, Benjamin Sirsa, or Jiminy Grille. Anyway, he's the conscience of Pinocchio. So Giuseppe, when we discussed earlier, you mentioned customer satisfaction surveys where producers keep asking question after question to customers along the lines of, please tell us how much you love us, and little about little questions around the nature of what do you need from us. And I think this is the guiding star of this discussion. So you, Giuseppe, are the father of MySQL Sandbox, now known as DB Deployer. Can you say a sentence or two about that?
Yes, DB Deployer is a tool that allows you to deploy several instances of a database server that looks and feels like MySQL. So MySQL, Percona Server, MariaDB, NetDB cluster, Percona ExtraDB cluster. So you can deploy several copies of that in the same host, mostly for the purpose of testing.
Okay. So you, Giuseppe, watched all the presentations, perhaps not Otto's on Debian, but most of them anyway. Did you learn anything new from them that you didn't already know?
Yes, I learned that MariaDB is testing on macOS. This was news to me because I've been asking for a package, a tarball for macOS since the early days of MySQL Sandbox and DB Deployer now. And I was always told we don't have such facility. So I'm puzzled by the fact that you have builds of MariaDB server for testing in macOS, but you don't release such tarballs or such builds in any format.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I will later on let you, Pinocchio's conscience, ask the other panelists a few questions. But while you are thinking about what you would want to ask them, I have some questions of my own. And my first question then goes to present another panelist here, another special guest on the panel who hasn't presented so far. And that's Elena Stepanova, working for MariaDB Corporation and doing quality assurance. So Elena, is there other testing applied on new MariaDB server releases beyond MTR, the MariaDB test run?
Yes, sure. We have several different setups for testing. First of all, buildbot doesn't just run MTR tests, it also runs different kinds of tests, installation and upgrade specifically for packages of different kinds. Secondly, our in-team testers perform ad hoc testing of different bug fixes, non-trivial bug fixes, which developers deem to be a little bit too risky to push directly into main trees. So they need some additional, for example, random or stress testing or load testing, or maybe even manual testing of some kind. And also I run a fairly big set of regression tests. My setups combined run about 10,000 test runs a day.
Whoa.
It translates into roughly 500 test hours a day on all main branches. So about 90% of that is feature integration tests of different kinds, different combinations of features, not all at once, but parts of them together. And the rest are data upgrade tests, which are different from package upgrade tests, Maria backup, and crash recovery tests.
Over 10,000 tests a day, there's only 86,400 seconds every day, so that's more than one test every 10 seconds. So I have a generic question, very much directed from anybody in the community, and perhaps it's to be answered by you, Elena, or perhaps by Sanja. So what should I do if I, despite all the testing that goes around, if I find a bug in MariaDB Server as a user of MariaDB, what should I do?
Oh, surely you should report it, but what we need, I assume that you don't just want to make people know that you have found a bug, but you actually want it fixed. And if it's the case, what we need is the ways to reproduce it most of all, because we appreciate all notifications of bugs that users encounter, but realistically, the only useful ones are those which we can actually fix. So when users just dump a crash report from the MariaDB error log, they don't do anything wrong because the error log actually tells them to do so, to report a bug to MariaDB. But from the usefulness point of view, it's pretty low because we cannot do much about it. What we need is to know what we have to do to repeat this issue. Then we can confirm it, and then it will have high chances to be fixed.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Sanja, you did a presentation recently on doing bug reporting. Anything to add on top of Elena's great answer already?
Oh, no, the same. Reproduce. The way to reproduce is most important thing. Everything else could be important, but only to us to do the same, the reproduction.
Okay, so now I have a question which is going to be the same question for everybody. And perhaps you, Sanja, who are already talking, could be the first person answering it. It's an innocent little question on the release schedule, which is the topic of this entire Minifest. So now we have one major release every year, such as 10.5, roughly a year, and one minor release, such as 10.5.8, every quarter, plus some unscheduled emergency releases. So from your perspective, everybody can answer only from their own perspective. Is that too little? Is that too much? Or is it just right? What's Sanja's opinion?
It's okay because one is in, other is out. So it's a number of releases we are doing, like from version to version is more or less the same. Maybe not okay. We would be better do less, but okay, it's for our users make some variety to choose from. But for me, one per quarter release and one per year is what at least so far it's the best.
Mm-hmm. Is Elena of the same opinion?
I don't mind us releasing every year. I think it's okay on many different reasons, but I find it a little difficult that we maintain every release for such a long time. I would much prefer if we had, say, one release which a long-term support supported release, and maybe a few releases which are short-term, kind of like Ubuntu does. So it would allow us to focus the testing more on specific releases.
So the frequency as such is good, but the duration of like serving every single major release for long, that's something you would want to discontinue a bit earlier. So what does Ian say?
From my perspective, the release schedule seems to work quite well. It can become a bit of a wish list where everyone would love to have a new major release every month packed full of all the latest new features. So it's matching the capacity to deliver this and to create these new features with what's actually achievable. But I think the frequency works quite nicely. I mean, you can argue with more resources, MariaDB can add more new features into the major releases, differentiate them from each other, but given the available resources, I think the frequency works quite well. I was also interested to hear, I think it was in Kamal's talk when Kai asked him the question about do we need to focus more on stability or do we need to focus more on new features? And his answer was, as far as he's concerned, MariaDB is very stable and he would like to see more new features. And that answer sort of been coming across to that point of view more recently, because being inside MariaDB, you see all the bug reports, all the problems, and you realize it looks like a bit of a train smash sometimes from the inside, but actually from the outside, most people aren't affected by many of these issues. Things are quite stable. They would like to see new features. So that's interesting to see. I mean, there's this concept of multiple nines of uptime. You can maybe apply a similar concept to the impact of a bug report. Here's a crashing bug. It looks terrible. And obviously for the user, it's critical. It must be fixed. But perhaps it's only a bug that affects one user out of all the millions out there. So it has a very, very small impact. And it's hard to put that in perspective sometimes, seeing the reports coming in.
So external perspective, Giuseppe, what's your take on this?
I'm not very much affected by that. I try to keep my tool updated so that it can deal with most of the versions, provide that I get some advance notice of what is going to happen. The only problem I would like to avoid is that there is a new release and the day after I get bug reports because for some new reasons, DB deployer doesn't work with MySQL 8.0.12 or MariaDB 10.5.1, something like that has happened. So I have an agreement with Oracle, for example. They send me advance notice of what is going to happen, so I can take measures and check that the tool works with the new releases. I get also a preview of the release, so I can make sure that it's working as expected. So far, I have not had such agreement with MariaDB, and also the fact that it doesn't have Mac packages is a bit of annoyance, but it could be overcome.
So I think, Vincenzo, you should be the next person answering and also addressing what Giuseppe just said. So while we're not yet providing buildbot releases for OS X, that hopefully is coming up soon, but I believe that the preview type of thing is done by buildbot our side. And also, Vincenzo, don't forget answering the same question about frequency yourself, but please first comment on what Giuseppe said.
All right, so lots of things to remember. I'll start with Giuseppe's first. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we are working on our new buildbot, which is buildbot.mariadb.org. where we are building more than 80-something combinations of MariaDB builds. All the builds are stored at ci.mariadb.org. So when we are getting close to release, there is the opportunity for you to download the packages that are going to be used for a release. Logistically, we probably would want to let you know that this is probably the branch that you should look at. But all the packages we have are visible and you can download them. Now, going back to macOS, we have a problem that we don't yet have the hardware to build it periodically. We are looking to fix that. We have done work to make sure that MariaDB compiles on OS X. So we have packages that can be installed. They're not DMGs, they are PKGs, but they should work. I hope we can try out with DB deployer and see if there's something we need to fix there as well. But we want to publish them, we just didn't get the hardware ready for that.
And your final question was, what's your own opinion about the frequency, once a year for major and once a quarter for minor?
Right. So about releases, I am happy with the quarterly release schedule because it frees up a bit of development time between releases. Otherwise, you're just doing releases all the time. However, I think we can reduce the burden by first making sure that every potential commit is releasable. So we're working towards protected branches to make sure that no tests fail within the master branches. So that's one thing. Now, personally, I think the current development version could have more frequent releases. So we are working on 10.6 now, and we have not yet had a nice release for 10.6, which I think is something we could do.
Mm-hmm. So by design, I left you, Sergey, last. So what's your take, and perhaps a summary of your comments towards what others think, but very importantly, your own view about the frequency and your reasoning behind it?
First, thought about what I've just heard about DEP and DB deploys issue. I think that any agreement when, via Oracle notifies him is a little bit fragile. It's GitHub, it should be possible to configure, I don't know, Travis or whatever CI he's using, just to take every or daily MariaDB and MySQL. You cannot do it for MySQL, okay? You can do it for MariaDB, you can take daily builds and test against the latest DB deploy release and get the warning as early as we push it. And then either fix DB deploy or complain to us that we did something wrong, because testing the pre-release might be a little bit too late. You can do it with, I realized you cannot do it with MySQL because they don't push, they close the code, you only see the releases. But for MariaDB, you can just test practically every push every day. Anyway, about release scheduler. So 1 year is a compromise between, well, users want to see features as early as possible, and we want to get features as soon as possible out, but we also want to have every major release to have a lot of features. And those are, if we release one release every 10 years, it would have lots of new features, but features would have to wait a lot until they get released. So 1 year is kind of a compromise between that. I didn't hear users complaining about that, so that's apparently working well. We cannot do minor releases less than quarterly because it was explained in my talk. So they're tied to Oracle and MySQL releases. So as soon as MySQL releases out, users and distributions are urging us to have MariaDB releases, all the security issues fixed. That's why we time our releases to be immediately after MySQL releases, to have security fixes ported from MySQL and released as soon as possible. So we cannot do it less than quarterly. We can do it more than quarterly. We used to do it monthly, but again, it's a compromise between how much time we spend on doing releases, and again, and how often users want releases. Those releases, how want users actually want to upgrade. If you would do daily releases, nobody would want to upgrade MariaDB daily. And as we don't hear, or at least I don't hear complaints about users that quarterly is too unfrequently, we do quarterly. With always green branches and automatic merges and more automation in the new buildbot, we should be able to do more frequent releases without, well, spending much of the development time on that. But again, it depends on how often users want them. And so far, it looks like quarterly works very well.
Makes good sense to me. So then I have a combination of two questions. What should we do better and what should we do less? So the question, what should we do better? I mean, it's from the perspective of what can we do to make the life of our users easier? So what do you think that the user base is struggling with now? How can we inform them better, communicate, listen, share? But since we are not looking now at lots of new resources, we also should do something else less. What could we perhaps focus less on? So if you can have a balanced comment on put more effort on this, but listen, I'm aware of that and that area that you probably don't need to do so much work on. And why don't I put Vincenzo on the spot first?
All right, so I'm not entirely certain what we'd be doing less, because it's hard to figure out what you should stop doing. But
it is.
I think we should really focus more on letting people know about the developments within MariaDB, because every time I go to a conference anywhere, I am surprised by people not even knowing features in end-of-life releases. So I've got questions from users about roles, which were initially introduced in 10.0. So I think it's very important we increase.
We should inform people about the new features in 10.0, which are not so new.
Yes. So I think we have a lot to go in explaining to us all the good things that MariaDB is doing. So we should definitely do more of that. And I think this panel is one step in the right direction there. Now, what we should be doing less, that is tricky.
I don't expect any good answers to the other question, to the less one. But Ian, what's your take?
I think I'm also going to struggle with the what should we do less of. I'll see if anything comes to mind. But as far as what we should do better, it ties into Vincenzo's comment about people not knowing about roles in 10.0. My main focus is on the documentation of MariaDB. That's an area I would love to see improved, because it's mostly me working there alone, and I get quite excited when somebody comes in. So anybody from the community can contribute to our knowledge base. It's available under a free license, and I normally get very excited when somebody does. So please, anyone watching, feel free to jump in there. But documentation is also more than just writing about it somewhere. I mean, quite a lot of features that I come across or fixes. There's a comment in a Jira report, and that's now documented. But it's actually not, because no one is going to, very few people are going to go to that level of detail to find out what was changed. So it needs to be, on the release notes, it needs to be integrated in all the pages where that topic could be relevant. There need to be links to this new feature. And then outside of MariaDB as well, on various forums and things, or anywhere else that it's useful, we need to get people to know about these new features. So that's one area I would like to see substantially improved. The other is which I guess ties into DB deployer, working with our not yet fully existent Mac builds, is integration with third parties. So we do our internal testing, and that's all great, but we don't have that much integration with outside communities. And for example, it was a PHP issue. I know we've started now testing internally for that. So I think collaborating with various communities to help test their particular environment and to make sure that MariaDB works with them is something we can do together. I mean, we won't be able to do it just on our own, but by talking to the right people and sharing resources, we can get better at that.
Mm-hmm. So Giuseppe, perhaps it's your turn now, and you can also, if you have any questions for the other panelists, you can list them at the same point in time so that they can get time to think about it.
So regarding what MariaDB should do less, for example, sending me from mariadb.org to mariadb.com whenever I download something. About what MariaDB should do more, I have been asking for a minimal package, which I managed to do with Oracle and with Percona. So both, they have released minimal packages that are very useful when you are dealing with, for example, containers where you need a small package, or when you use a package like DB deployer where you need a small thing to download quickly if you want to download a specific version for a short purpose. So I would like MariaDB to join the club and organize a set of minimal packages that can be downloaded quickly. Right now, every package of MariaDB costs something like 2.5 gigabytes, and it would be nice if we had something that was only 40 megabytes, like Oracle and Percona. Another suggestion that I would like to do is that whenever I go to conferences, I saw that people are using DB deployer with MariaDB for several purposes, and I was wondering whether it would be a good idea for MariaDB QA to insert the tool into the regular testing suite. It doesn't have to be the kind of test that DB deployer does internally. That is something like 22,000 tests that span for 3 hours. But a simple test like let's try to deploy this new version of MariaDB to see if something is breaking would be useful for both parties.
Makes sense. So, Elena, do you want to comment on that?
On DB deployer specifically?
Both.
Well, I'll start with that. Yeah, we can try to do that, but as Sergey already mentioned, the other way to do it could be that Giuseppe can pull MariaDB server from GitHub regularly, and it can be tested this way, because realistically we have very limited capacity of internal testing, and we would very much appreciate the help from the community, especially if there is already the tool and there are already tests. So all is needed is that the MariaDB code, which is readily available at GitHub, is pulled automatically, right, and built and trained regularly. So yes, we could probably do it internally, but also we could ask the community to help with that while we internally focus on something else. So,
I will, by the way, talk to Daniel Black about this. He's now in Canberra sleeping, so that's why he couldn't join. But he's very much looking into community CI, and for him to reach out to you, Giuseppe, would be a good idea to see whether we should even do both things, both Sergey's idea and your idea. But sorry for disturbing you, Elena. Your idea about what we should do better and what we should do less.
Right, but it's actually very much in line with my perception of what we should do more in terms of testing. Obviously, my area is quality control and testing, so I'm thinking about that. And it's these two questions, what we should do more and less, are very much combined when it comes to testing, because we have limited capacity, and whenever we want to extend something, we have to shrink something else. And what I would like to do more, much more than we do now, is testing MariaDB Server in different realistic setups which are used by the community, by the user base, such as combinations with different third-party applications and setups like WordPress, whatever. Because we do a lot of internal testing, but there are numerous configurations which people use widely in the world, but we never test them and never even think about them. For example, some of you probably heard about the recent issue with the third-party connector. And even if we tested this release for, I don't know, a month, we would have never found this problem just because we didn't have the tests. We do now. Now when this problem was discovered, the new buildbot was extended and some third-party connector tests have been added there, and we will probably add even more later. But that's just an example of what we're severely lacking. And while doing that, what I am planning to do less is that these feature integration tests, which I mentioned before, which take about 90% of my current test setups, they seem to be very efficient. They find a lot of bugs, new bugs and old bugs, but the reality is these bugs probably affect very little part of our user base. Like Ian mentioned before, they seem to be important crashing bugs or problems, but probably very few users actually do what these tests do. So I think we can do a little less of it, and we will still have a sufficient amount of such bugs found, probably more than we have the capacity to fix.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lena. So I think we have Sanja and Sergey yet to answer. So Sanja first.
Okay, as I'm developer, so my main concern is to make more bug fixes, because even if we test a lot, produce a lot of bug fixes, but if they will not be fixed, it's kind of useless activity. So, and of course, I could say that tests and documentation information is also very important. It's never too small amount of this. I couldn't say something about less.
Okay. Sergey, what's your take?
When you said about something doing more and less, so I'm engineer, so my first thought was about what we should do less about doing less, you know, those manual recurring tasks that's so easy to automate, or maybe not so easy to automate, but they still should be automated so that we could do something more creative instead. And this is what Vicente was talking about in the new buildbot that would help us to, well, that we should stop constantly, well, not constantly, well, periodically fixing broken main trees, because the new buildbot in GitHub will ensure that they're never broken. They could help us doing repeatable manual rebases of and merges of bug fixes automatically. That's a pretty long checklist of manual things we need to do, well, our release manager needs to do a release. Those probably talk about that. And some of that probably have to be automated as well, so that release could be not as easy as click on a button, but as close to it as possible. Then repeating what Yelena has said, so, but again, from our mind and Sanja point of view, we should probably fix more bugs that actually affect real use case scenarios. And if that'll take time from fixing bugs that nobody cares about, then, well, so be it. I would still prefer to fix all the bugs, but given the choice between bugs that affect users and bugs that doesn't affect anybody, given time to fix only one of those, I would prefer to fix the bug that affects the real users. So we probably need to get better at, well, distinguishing which bug is which and finding those affecting users bug first and fixing them first.
Cool. So I've also asked all my generic questions, and I'm very thankful for them, but this might have caused you to get further questions that you would like to ask each other. So now the floor is open for anybody who wishes to ask another panelist something as prompted by the discussion so far. I feel very much like at home in Finland, everybody is silent, which means that either everybody is happy or doesn't think that their own questions is smart enough. I'll give you another chance. Pretend that you're not Finns.
You should probably help us with that, with questions.
Well, one question could be, how do we check the impact of a bug? I mean, we have one mechanism in Jira, which is the votes and the comments. So if an issue has many votes, we can understand that it's people are watching it, people are interested in it. But I don't think it's that widely used. So there's how can we get a better grip on the impact of an issue or the desire for a new feature to be implemented?
Yeah, that's a great question, but who can answer it? Does anybody have a way to measure the impact of a bug other than good judgment in a case-by-case basis?
I don't think so. I think sometimes when you even start fixing the bug, it's not clear what impact it could have. Of course, if it's not like half of your user base is complaining, but if it's security issue, if it's really security issue or whatever, sometimes it's clear, sometimes not. So I don't think that.
Well, there's an extreme case that happens every 2-3 years when we release. Well, when we make a release and it's broken in a way that users start complaining even before we actually announced it. As soon as it hits repositories, we get multiple complaints on mailing list, on all the possible messengers in Jira, numerous people reporting the same bug independently, so that duplicates. This shows very strong impact on users. Well, this is actually a reason when we immediately release fixed binaries. So it's not a particular criteria of us doing something good, but it's just an extreme case of when we get a lot of feedback about the impact. Usually we don't get that. So it's just
Yes, but it mainly concerns regressions, very fresh regressions. When many people at once encounter the same issue, they don't really even try to search for already existing bugs. They just keep reporting it because it's fresh. It's a big problem right now. But when it comes to all the bugs, I don't think we really have any better tool than voting that Ian mentioned, but our users don't know about it. So I guess we need somehow to make sure that they're informed about it and they use it more widely. Whenever they find a bug report which they are affected by, they should use this voting mechanism or at least comment on the bug, so that we know that there are people interested in it. Because we do pay attention when several users comment on an internally reported issue, we prioritize it higher than it used to be initially. It is important.
Good comment, good thinking. So last chance to ask other questions from the other panelists.
I do have a question for probably the best target is Giuseppe here. So Giuseppe, what do you think of the selection of downloads that you have now for MariaDB? I know you mentioned that they are a bit big. We are working on making them smaller, and I think the newest releases are 300-something megabytes. But we now have tarballs, we have RPM packages, we have deb packages. Do you have any preference for any one of those? Is there some other form you would want us to publish packages in?
I only use tarballs, so I'm not very much interested in the other formats. What I'm mostly concerned is the size of the contents. So once I unpack the tarball, I usually need to remove a lot of things that I don't need, like the MySQL test directory, which is huge, which I would need if I were developing a feature for MariaDB or MySQL, but I don't need in this case. So, for example, Oracle has decided a long time ago to split the package, so you get the test suite in a separate tarball, which makes the tarball much smaller. And on top of that, they made also the minimal tarballs. So the thing that I don't really have much choice at the moment with MariaDB packages. I only need the tarball specific for the operating system that I'm using, which is either Linux, either Ubuntu or CentOS. So my choice is limited.
You can, of course, download RPMs or Debian packages and extract binaries from there.
I could, but why should I? I mean,
to get smaller downloads, avoid embedded, avoid MySQL test, avoid all the stuff you don't need.
As I said, I really need to make tests for DB deployer using the regular tarballs. I couldn't say somebody who complains that it doesn't work with MariaDB and tell them to download the RPM, extract the tarballs, and
of course not. It's something that should happen automatically.
Yeah, but for this reason, I was suggesting to have minimal tarballs. The point is, I'm not a regular user of MariaDB. I use it only when there is a trouble with a new version with DB deployer. This is why I try to update the DB deployer in such a way that it works with new versions, but I usually get notified that when such a problem arises. I'm not going to check actively every month that something is changed and something needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe, and I think thank you all of the panelists. This was the panel discussion at the MariaDB Server Minifest December 2020 edition, and we wanted to get feedback. We did get feedback, so thanks especially also not just to Giuseppe but to Elena, who came for the panel, and all the panelists who have always presented. So we now have some homework to do, and thanks for attending. Until next time.